This session of Visual JForex, I will be continuing the work on the indicator average directional movement index DMI. This is the third and the final part, and in today's setup, we will be focusing on the sell side of the equation. So now let us head back to the Visual JForex board, which has been developed by the Dukascopy Bank SA. The setup so far includes this instrument subscription. The default instrument is EURUSD. After that, the position amount was defined at 0. I got these three DMI blocks of the varying time periods and these historical candle blocks to look at the price volatility and accordingly place the trade whenever we see that the momentum is bearish enough. And this time around, we are keeping the stop loss and the target price dynamic. So for that purpose, this last hour's difference of high and low was taken into consideration, and accordingly, this stop loss and take profit is being defined. On the lower side, these requirements need to be fulfilled for any trade to be placed. So this deals with the conditions for the execution of the buy order, and finally here is the trade command block for the buy trade. Now I will give you a brief refresher on the idea behind the algorithm. Here, for any sell trade to take place, we need this DI minus to be above the DI plus. So that's quite simple. And whenever we have this condition in place, we will keep searching for the entry point. And for the entry point, the reliance is being placed on the lower time frame charting. This larger time frame charting of 4 hours is simply for finding the direction for the underlying instrument. So for any sell trade to take place, we need the bearish momentum for the underlying instrument, and these two DI plus and DI minus values will help us define the condition. And whenever we have DI minus above DI plus, that means the bears are having the upper hand, and this might be the appropriate time to start looking for the sell trade. And after that, we take the help of this 5 minute chart, 5 minute time frame, and we will need to see that there is good enough momentum. And for that, we are relying on the ADX. ADX value should be above 25 and it should be rising. And as and when we will have the crossover, we will place the order. By crossover, I mean the DI minus value should rise above the DI plus value in last 5 minutes, and prior to that, the DI minus value should have been lower compared to the DI plus value. So whenever we will have the ADX and this DI plus DI minus value combination providing us the opportune time to get involved for the sell trade, we will look to place the order, and it will be a market order. Whatever is the market price, the execution will take place then and there. So that's how the logic is going to be, and it's quite simple to understand. I hope you have been able to understand it. Okay, so now let us go back to adding the conditions using the if blocks. Since our setup needs to be symmetrical, the if blocks will be equal to what we have used while defining the buy side. That means we will need 8 if blocks, and after that the trade command block. And here we will have to carry out calculations also. 2 more calculation expression blocks will be needed. Since we need to carry out these calculations, I think it will be better if we get it done first, or we can do it later on also, since we will need to create the new variables for output values. And one thing which we have to pay attention is that the data type of these two outputs should be of integer, not double. Here, this difference in color gives you idea that data type is different for this variable. So I think it will be better once we get the trade command block for the sale. We will then define these two calculations. Okay, so first we start with the blocks, we define the conditions, and as I said, we are going to need 8 of these. So in one go I will bring in 8. And on the 4-hour time frame we need this DI minus to be having the upper hand. That means DI minus should be greater than DI plus. First input greater than second input. And moving on to the 5-minute time period, we need this ADX value to be on the rise. So last 5 minutes ADX should be above the penultimate 5-minute candles ADX. So we need ADX 27 to be greater than ADX 28, and also ADX 27 should be above 25. Now that we have defined the conditions involving ADX, we shift our attention to these DI plus and DI minus values. And in case of DI plus 27, we will need it to be lower than DI minus 27. This block has a look back period of 1. That means it is the last 5-minute data for the DMI. And in last 5 minutes we need the DI minus to have crossed below the DI plus, crossed above, not below. So first input needs to be greater than second input, and in penultimate 5 minutes the DI minus should have been below DI plus. First input less than second input. Okay. Now we have to consider the price action data, for which we are taking the help of these get historical blocks. And last 5-minute candle should have its closing value lower than its opening value. That means candle 29 close should be lower than its opening value. Auto created variable, here it is. And I think we will need to change the sequence. Okay, I will join this one first. Now first input needs to be less than second input, and as and when price will start to drop below the last 5-minute candle close, we will look to initiate the trade. That means we have to compare this candle 31 and candle 30 seconds closing values with the candle 29. So this is going to be the common input. candle 32's close needs to have been above the candle 29 close. So first input greater than second input. And after this, we can bring in the trade command block. First input less than second input. Okay. So now let us arrange these if blocks on the lower side. We have to now define these variables for the stop loss and take profit. So we will need to create two more variables. Prior to that, I will consider these values where we need to carry out some changes. This trade amount will be changed to 0.1 million. The page will be 2 pips. And here I will create a new variable in both these places. And its value, we will assign it to the calculation expression once we get that calculation done. This difference of last hour's candle high and candle low will be our stop loss. I think even if we directly had used this value, even that might have sufficed. Because last time around, the difference was that we were considering the candle high, not candle high, the candle closing and candle opening value, but this time around, we are simply relying on the high and low. So we don't need to carry out the fresh calculations. I was mistaken in, I guess, I overlooked that this is the simple difference between the high and low. And we are also not defining the condition that last hourly close should be below the last hourly opening value. So Because of that, complication is avoided. So we straight away take the values which are already defined, which we also used for the buy side. Same will hold good for the sell side also. Okay. So with this, our setup is complete, the algorithm is complete, and all that needs to be done is to export this file in the Java to the JForex platform, and there on the historical data you can test it for months, for years, for weeks, whichever time frame you want to test it on, and see whether it is profitable or not, and accordingly you can take your call whether to use it or not. So I hope you have been able to understand the logical and the execution part of this algorithm, and hopefully you will be trying it out on your own. So that's it from my side for today's session. Do subscribe to the Dukascopy webinar channel to stay updated on the market development. See you next time. Till then, goodbye.